And well, welcome everyone to this meeting of the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee. Tonight, Mayor Hamlin and Councillor Jeffrey send their regrets. I begin with the land acknowledgement. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges this Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationships it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation. And I'll move to item 2 on our agenda, which is the adoption of the agenda, that the content of the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee agenda for February 6, 2023 be adopted as amended, and that is that the C 2023-06 Staff Code of Conduct be removed. I look for a mover and a seconder, Councillor Perry and Councillor Ring, and all those in favor. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Don't see any. If anything comes up during our discussions, please just advise. There's no deputations this evening. Under the consent agenda, we have that council hear and receive the general consent agenda. And further, that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and not verified or approved as being correct. 5.1 is the NVCA's 2023 draft budget, the Collingwood portion, and 5.2, motion to support Township of Petrolia regarding compensation for school board elections. That council support the Township of Petrolia's request for school boards to be responsible for conducting their own trustee elections, or at minimum, municipalities be compensated by the school boards for overseeing such trustee elections. Do I have a mover for those items? Councillor Baines and Councillor Potts is the seconder. Before I call it to vote, does anyone wish to speak to anything? Vote or speak?
Are you asking to poll, or are you going to vote first, then poll?
We'll vote and then poll. Yes, that's right. So we'll vote then on that. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. And is there any item that you would like polled and spoken to? Go ahead, Councillor.
5.2.
So 5.2, you go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Obviously, we have received a motion from the Township of Petrolia relative to requesting their board to underwrite the cost of their elections for school trustees. Similarly, in the town of Collingwood, and in fact, most municipalities in Simcoe County, the municipality is involved in the execution of the school board elections. And I'm wondering if, through you, if I can ask the clerk to speak to some of the activities that we are responsible for on behalf of the school boards.
Certainly, Clerk Thomas.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Deputy Mayor Fryer. To address Councillor Doherty's question, so in receiving and approving that consent agenda item, that motion has been passed. But for further clarification for members of the Standing Committee and the public, municipalities are responsible for conducting elections for school board trustees. It does come with all the components related to conducting elections for council member positions as well. it was quite evident this year that there was municipalities throughout the province of Ontario, however, that had their whole slate of council members acclaimed, but they still had to conduct elections because they had to conduct them for school board activities. So together, the process that's required is obviously there's a lot of communication and public education on what positions are for and what that entails. There's the collection of nomination papers and fees. There's managing signs for them. There is responsibilities dealing with ensuring they have the appropriate ministry training opportunities that as municipal council nominees have as well. And as when it comes to the end of the election, we're required to, if we're not the primary clerk responsible for that jurisdiction, we're required to provide all of our information to the clerk's jurisdiction that it's the trustee position is for. So Collingwood generally has the city of Barrie for 2 of our school board elections, and that clerk is overall responsible, but there's a lot of coordination that goes between municipal clerks. So I definitely see the merits on, assisting with the process, because the election does cost a lot of money. So if you're doing it, I can appreciate the cost efficiencies of doing it as one entity, but I do think that we should be fairly compensated for providing that for school boards.
Thank you.
Follow up?
Yes, just one quick follow-up. Now that we have passed that motion, may I suggest that we copy AMO on this resolution? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Just a follow-up to the clerk. Is there an approximate dollar cost that you could come up with? The staff time alone, I'm thinking of all this for this. You must be able to quantify it if it's not too time-consuming. Not now necessarily, but I'd be interested to know in the future. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to staff reports. And item 6.1 is C 2023-04 Annual Committee Board Report, and it's the Affordable Housing Task Force. And I'll ask Clerk Thomas to introduce this subject.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. Deputy Mayor Fryer. So we do have a very brief introduction to the presentation, similar to what we did for our Corporate and Community Services meeting this afternoon. We have one direct report that reports to the SIC, and that is our Affordable Housing Task Force. And probably by the time Robin gets it up, I'll get through the slide. So this is a requirement of our strategic plan. So it is a requirement annually to report, our committees and boards to report to council, to advise on their past accomplishments and their goals for the upcoming year, for full transparency. And I think more so of a recognition from council, the public and staff for all the hard work that they do for the municipality throughout the year. Slide. Next slide.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Fryer and members of council. I'm Jen Ray, the Housing Development Coordinator for the town of Collingwood, and it's my pleasure to be here today with Doug Linton, who is the chair of the Affordable Housing Task Force, to provide the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee with the task force's annual report to council. Next slide, please. Task Force was created in 2021, and it's reported on its original mandate in November 2021 with over 50 recommendations to council. In early 2022, the task force's mandate was updated to continue providing advice, guidance, and assistance for approved affordable housing recommendations, consult on the preparation of an affordable housing master plan, and act as a forum for community conversation and advocacy. Now I'll turn it over to Doug to share some highlights from 2021.
Ben, good afternoon, Deputy Mayor, Council. The first thing I'd like to do now is just thank very much the previous council for forming the task force in the first place. It was through their foresight and recognition of the housing affordability crisis that got the ball rolling in 2021. Furthermore, I'd like to thank you folks, the current council, for the incredible support that we've received in our ongoing work and efforts to try to help come to some kind of understanding of the issue and how we can tackle it. So in 2022, some of the accomplishments led or recommended by our task force, first and foremost, the establishment of the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund of $350,000, one of the key aspects of our report in November of 2021. And further to that, then the continued funding through this year's budget as well in the amount, I believe, about the same dollar figure. So that's a huge accomplishment. Secondly, of course, hiring a housing development coordinator, Jen Ray, starting with us in September of 2022. And that was a huge accomplishment as well. Jen has proven herself to be extraordinarily adept and skilled, hardworking beyond belief. She has kept us all organized, and we're very grateful that she's in place doing the work that she's doing. In June of 2022, an affordable housing workshop was held that was well received and well attended. In addition to, in September, a local employers roundtable hearing some of the concerns that employers had regarding workforce housing in our community. Approval, or at least, working towards with, again, Coordinator Ray, towards the Rapid Accessory Dwelling Unit program that she'll be reporting to shortly. An incredible amount of work went into that. And again, Coordinator Ray deserves great credit for that. In September, we hosted hosted the third Collingwood World Summit Habitat in Towns. We were able to make a number of presentations to that group in various workshops. As well, we were able to participate and hear from people around the world with incredibly innovative and thoughtful approaches to housing affordability issues. It was an extraordinary opportunity. It was my first time in attendance. I had an opportunity to present during that, and it was truly a remarkable opportunity. We are providing, instead of provided, I believe, input into the official plan review. We will continue to do so as that OP review continues. The development of communication tools, including the affordable housing webpage and video. If any of you saw the video, I'm afraid your marketing people hired rather D-rate actors for that. Hopefully better representatives can be found in the future. One very important key point, in my opinion, was the information sessions that we held for new members of council. And I think that's a really important thing to note. All new councillors and some incumbent councillors participated in those information sessions. And I think what that does is give you a really strong indication of the level of interest and emphasis that is being placed on affordable housing, the issue that it presents, the initiatives that we're trying to come up with. And I think it's a really strong indicator of this council's support of those affordable housing initiatives during this term. Next slide, please. Recruitment of new members to fill vacancies. It's an ongoing thing. We have people coming and going from task force. There's a lot of work involved, as I'm sure you know. It requires a huge commitment. Some people are willing to make that commitment, and others step away after they've done their bit, and they've done some remarkable work. So it's an ongoing thing. We've just completed one vacancy. We've discovered that we have a second now that we are looking to fill. We are placing current emphasis right now on trying to identify a member for the task force who represents the lived experience population. We really would like to be able to include people who can speak particularly and specifically to their experiences with the housing affordability issue, so that we're not just, is coming at it from our own perspectives, but those coming at it from people with lived experience. General research and advocacy. Since the task force was founded, it has been a non-stop process of research, learning. The number of people we've spoken to, academics and developers and tiny home specialists and people from around the world that have looked at different ways of approaching this issue. So that research continues. It's a non-stop learning curve. It's challenging, but it's an incredible opportunity, I think. Advocacy, again, it's an ongoing task that we see ourselves playing. And then finally, relationship building. I think as things move on, And I think as initiatives are undertaken, be it short-term accommodation reports, be it accessory development, rapid housing, there are things that we're going to need to do to develop those relationships in order to push those issues forward. Next slide, please. So our goals, our priorities for 2023. First and foremost, the Affordable Housing Master Plan. There's no question that that's going to be the big ticket item that we're all focusing on. And to that end, we've established a subcommittee within the task force of the Affordable Housing Master Plan subcommittee led by Marg, Sheeb, and Edie. That group is anxious to get to work, working with staff, working with the Nick Michael of Enberry Lyons Consulting to play an elevated role in the creation of that master plan. We hope to play a role in co-hosting community consultations regarding the Affordable Housing Master Plan. As we see that, we see education and information dissemination as being a really important part of what we do at the task force. So to co-host those community consultations will be vital, in my opinion. And then, of course, the implementation. I'm not sure what role we'll play in the implementation, but whatever role you assign to us, we will work our way through. The support and championing of the Rapid Accessory Dwelling Unit program that will be presented shortly. Again, just one of the roles that we play in terms of information. Birch Street. One of the mandates that was provided to us in the first iteration of the task force was to try to provide recommendations as to what to do with the Johnson Trust properties on Birch Street. We have a lot of ideas. We would love to see things moving probably more quickly than they are, but we recognize that they have to play a role within the Affordable Housing Master Plan. Nonetheless, we see ourselves as being champions of the Birch Street redevelopment project in a way that will be meaningful to the community and the affordable housing file. Communications and engagement. Our Vice Chair, Jack Vanderkooy, just shared with us the other day a document that the South Georgian Bay Institute has created to look at helping to alleviate the negative impacts of NIMBYism on any projects like we're facing, trying to turn NIMBYism into YIMBYism. Yes, in my backyard. It will be a challenge. But again, I think it's a role that we see ourselves playing at the task force. Acting also as community champions, continuing, providing a forum for community discussion, and finally, as an advisory committee to this council, providing recommendations on opportunities as they relate to affordable housing supply in Collingwood. So, we've been busy. We continue to hope to be busy throughout 2023, and thank you for your support.
So I'll look to the gallery to see if anybody from the members of the public would like to speak to the report that we just received. And then there, I'll look to Clerk Almas to see if there's anybody listening that would like to speak.
Thank you. We do have some attendees participating remotely. If you are on our Zoom as an attendee and you would like to address the standing committee regarding any report this evening, when you open it for public comment, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Just to speak to this report at this time.
Thank you. And I am going to read the motion in, but I will say thank you very much for the presentation. Really appreciated. That staff report C 2023-04 annual report of board and advisory committee activities specific to the Affordable Housing Task Force from 2022 and priorities for 2023 be herein received. And I'd like to mover Councillor Ring and Councillor Houston as seconder. And I will open the floor to members of council who would like to speak at this point in time. Certainly, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. As a new member of the Affordable Housing Task Force, I just want to congratulate the committee for the depth of knowledge that they have acquired over these past 2 years, for their insights and for their incredible commitment to advancing this file. I guess this is what you would call a super committee. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll just add my echo Councillor Doherty's thanks. As you mentioned, Chair Linton, you referred to it as an advisory board, and we look to your advice very seriously. You can see that from this group, and we've talked about it numerous times over the last 3 months that when we were campaigning, it's the single most important topic that's out there for everybody. And so the work your task force is doing for us and advising us in that realm is greatly appreciated. Thank you. And on that, I will then, we have the motion on the table then. All those in favor of receiving? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to 6.2, and it's CAO 2023-03, Rapid Additional Dwelling Unit, ADU, Deployment Pilot Program, and next steps. That staff report CAO 2023 for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report certainly represents an exciting evolution of the rapid accessory dwelling unit program that was previously endorsed in principle by Council. The Affordable Housing Task Force, in its recommendations of 2021, identified increasing the supply and stock of accessory dwelling units within the town of Collingwood as one of the quickest ways to improve affordability within our community through gentle density, and also to find ways to encourage the rents for accessible or accessory dwelling units to be within that key affordability range that the town targets for modest to middle income homeowners. We do have Coordinator Ray here today, Chair, to take us through the details of the program, and in the interest of time, we could move directly to her presentation.
Thank you, Coordinator Ray. Welcome again.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's my pleasure to present the committee with an update on the Rapid Accessory Dwelling Unit Deployment Program. Next slide, please. As Director Valentine mentioned, accelerating the deployment of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, is seen as one of the fastest ways to help alleviate the affordable housing crisis, and was one of the Affordable Housing Task Force's November 2021 recommendations to Council. In September 2022, Council approved the Rapid Accessory Dwelling Unit Program in principle, and in October 2022, the province introduced Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, which is adding further momentum to support gentle intensification, adding up to 3 units per lot in existing residential areas. We're aiming to dovetail the proposed Rapid ADU pilot program with the more widely supported elements of Bill 23 to remove barriers to landowners wishing to establish ADUs. I should note that accessory dwelling units come by many different names, including accessory apartments, second units, coach houses, garden suites. I'm using the blanket term ADU to cover all of them just for simplicity for this presentation. Next slide, please. The Rapid ADU pilot program has 4 areas of focus, starting with a one-window service for landowners. Next slide, please. We're creating resources, including a dedicated email, adu@collingwood.ca, which will help streamline inquiries. We're also creating a webpage that will break down the Bill 23 changes and clearly outline the options for landowners, and we'll also host links to resources and local vendors such as contractors, designers, and lenders. We will help navigate homeowners through the ADU process to proactively identify challenges that they might run into. We'll connect them with our partners at the Conservation Authority if needed, and basically do whatever we can to make sure that the application is as complete as possible before submitted, just to avoid any delays during the review period. The planning and building teams are prioritizing these applications, and to that end, we'll make every effort to meet the targeted 2-day turnaround for inquiries to the email address mentioned before, a 5-day turnaround for zoning certificates, a 10-day turnaround for building permits, or a 5-day turnaround when pre-approved plans are used. Next slide, please. That leads to the second area of focus, which is prefabricated and pre-approved designs. Next slide, please. This section is specific to detached ADUs, sometimes called coach houses or granny suites, and it's intended to help simplify a landowner's options by giving them ready-made and approved units or plans. There are two streams here. The first is prefabricated and modular homes that are constructed off-site. If the unit is CSA approved, it is also approved by the Town of Collingwood's building department and is essentially good to go if it is a right fit for the property. The second stream is stick build, which is a detached unit that can be built from scratch on a property. To help provide easy access and increase building permit turnaround time, the building department will review detached ADU stick build designs for pre-approval, which can then be purchased from the designer at a reduced rate. We will put out a call to designers and builders to have their designs featured on our website to help facilitate the program. We want to be thoughtful about the units that we're highlighting. Therefore, we're utilizing the best practices of other municipalities who have undertaken similar programs and are considering criteria such as green building design and urban design for the designs that are to be featured on our website. Next slide, please. Third area of focus, and perhaps the most important for Council's consideration, are the financial incentives that we're proposing for this program. Next slide, please. The proposed Rapid ADU grant number 1 would provide a grant of $5,628 to cover zoning certificate and building permit fees, as well as some of the startup costs associated with undertaking an ADU build. This initial grant is not tied to affordability because we are trying to quickly increase rental inventory in our community without adding too many barriers. That said, we know that Council is concerned about the unintended consequences of the program creating short-term accommodations in town, so the proposed grant would be conditional on the individual signing an attestation that the unit would be rented out year-round for at least 5 years. In addition, we will promote and connect individuals to the County of Simcoe's Second Suite program, where homeowners can receive up to $30,000 to support an ADU build if the homeowner commits to renting it at an affordable rate for 15 years. Participating in the county's program is a big commitment, so for those who are successful recipients of this loan, we propose that the Town of Collingwood provide an additional $5,000 grant as a way to acknowledge their commitment to renting at an affordable rate. This will also reduce the town's administrative burden in ensuring compliance, as the county already has eligibility screening, agreements, and monitoring measures in place to ensure affordability. If an individual receives all three incentives, they will receive up to $40,628.62 towards the construction of their ADU. Next slide, please. You can see from the cost breakdown on your screen that shows the costs associated with Rapid ADU grants number 1 and number 2. And we've provided a low range of just over $112,000 if 20 units are created through grant number 1, and the high end of just over $212,000 if 20 units receive both grants. We are requesting Council's approval of the requested incentives from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund for this pilot program. As you can see, even small incentives can add up very quickly. These incentives are being recommended for the pilot, with additional incentives potentially coming out of the Affordable Housing Master Plan consultation. In addition, staff will monitor uptake and may adjust as required within the requested maximum budget allotment. The final focus of the proposed Rapid ADU program will likely not be ready at the onset of the program, but will develop through 2023 and beyond, and it involves the Town of Collingwood supporting landlords and tenants to help make the program a success. Next slide, please. These support services will include resources for landlords so that they understand their new responsibilities. We will also work with partner agencies to improve communication and reduce inefficiencies. We will facilitate landlord and tenant education and certification programs that are being delivered by partner agencies, and we will host Ask the Expert sessions on everything from financing to building to being a landlord. Finally, we will work to connect homeowners with new ADUs with the employers that we know are looking to house their workforce. Slide, please. We know that time is of the essence and that we need more units now, so we'll continue working on these back-end items between this meeting and the council meeting. And if council approves the program at the end of the month, we will start promoting rapid ADU grants in early March. Upon finalizing criteria, we will also put out a call for the pre-approved designs, which will be reviewed on a first-come, first-served basis. Review time will be dependent upon the volume received, so we have allocated 2 months for the initial intake, although we anticipate that we will receive more of the prefab modular designs because the designs already exist and are already approved. We hope to have an online gallery of designs up by June at the latest, with marketing, engagement, and demos happening throughout the town during the spring and summer months. Next slide, please. In summary, we hope that by providing one window service, pre-approved plans, financial incentives, and landlord support through this pilot program, more landowners will explore what can be done on their property and take the next steps in adding more rental inventory in Collingwood. Furthermore, we hope that this will build community champions who understand how citizens can play a vital role in creating more affordable housing and providing more opportunities for folks to live, work, and contribute to Collingwood's social fabric. We expect that the Rapid ADU program will evolve over time, and we look forward to encouraging feedback from homeowners to help us improve the program and further enhance processes. With that, I will turn it back to the chair for questions or comments.
Thank you very much. And first off, I will look to the gallery if there's anybody from the public who would like to come up and speak on this issue. And there, I'll turn to the viewing audience.
And there's no hands that are raised to address the staff report, Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Okay, so I've already read, if anybody would like me to read the motion again, I've already read the motion. I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder at this point in time, Councillor Baines and Councillor Perry. And then I will open it to the floor, and Councillor Potts, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Fryer. Just a question I have. We talked about there be a signing agreement for a resident for the ADU and to ensure that it was going to be rented out as at an affordable rate. How do we, or how would we track to ensure that that's happening? And if it's not, like, what enforcement would take place, or where do we go from there?
Through you, your chair, to Councillor Potts. Some of those details are still being worked out at the moment, to be quite honest. We're looking at having the attestation signed for keeping it a year-round rental and not on the affordability side on that first piece of it. On the second rapid ADU grant, if the applicant is successful, that would be tracked through the county, and they already have a system because they take a loan out on the mortgage, so they have a system already in place where they can alert if things have changed on the affordability side. As far as the making sure that there's a tenant in there year round, those are some items that we'll still need to consider.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Fryer. Through you, I just have a question on the county and Simcoe incentives. You said there's up to 30,000, and it said the first 20 units. Is that for the county or is that municipality? Because that 30, those 20, the first 20 units will go pretty quickly. I'm pretty sure of that if it's for county-wide.
Through the chair to Councillor Perry, the county, it is a county-wide program that, and
Right.
there's not, from what I understand, there's not a lot of uptake at this time, so there is quite a bit available. So if this incentive helps motivate Collingwood homeowners to participate, then there's
Okay, great. Thank you. I just want to say that this has been a long time coming. I think it's a great program. The town certainly needs this, and thank you very much for your presentation.
I can add that, and I can't think of the figure off the top of my head either, in the county portion that they've set aside in hopes of people being on the uptake is very sizable to help with it. So Councillor Houston.
On the county side, what does the county use as the metric to track for affordability? What do they consider affordable?
Through the chair to Councillor Houston, I do have that number in front of me. Just one. So the rental rate for the county is $993 a month to $1,192. That's dependent on the number of bedrooms, and it aligns with the town of Collingwood's threshold for moderate income renters, which is $900 a month to $1,300 a month.
Thank you.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. This is, I think, got all the marks of an excellent program. And I think you are to be congratulated because you have very rapidly brought this program forward, seeing as we just looked at the notion of providing such just late in the last quarter of last year. If I were to make one criticism of the report, it's under the one window and the timelines that you're offering, because the timelines look fantastic in terms of how quickly we can get people through the steps. But there's a big fat caveat there, contingent upon staff and workload, et cetera, et cetera. And it just seems to me that we'd be farther ahead not to make specific commitments to timelines if we're not confident that we can't fulfill them. Because as soon as you say that you can achieve something in X number of days, then the immediate expectation is that you can, and disappointment when you don't. So I'm just wondering if that's an element, just speaking for myself anyway, if that's an element that could be looked at, even if it came to the point where we extended the number of days for each level of approval just enough so that we're completely confident that we can deliver.
I'll turn to Director Valentine for that one, maybe.
Thank you, Chair. I can certainly start. One of the timelines is actually legislative, which is the building permit turnaround time. So the 10 days is already what the building department is working under. The quicker turnaround, the 5 days, would certainly be a target for the pre-approved designs. Please keep in mind that this is a pilot project. We would like the opportunity as staff. We do feel that we can meet these timelines. The caveats are in there in case we get a deluge, perhaps, right at the onset of the program. But we would certainly appreciate the opportunity to try to provide as rapid service as we can, and perhaps report back to councils in terms of whether we've been able to deliver. As I said, we're reasonably confident, but we're just unsure at this point, because it's a pilot project, how much interest we might get, particularly at the front end of the program. So we'd be a little bit reticent. It's a rapid ADU deployment program, and we'd really like to give those timelines a try and then come back and course correct if there's extreme difficulties that are encountered.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Councillor Ring was before me, so
That's
I knew that. That's why I was letting you go. Councillor Ring.
Okay, I'm gonna apologize before I start, because I should have known, but I just assumed that with us budgeting 5,000 for 20 units per year, that the county was their 20 units was for Collingwood. I'm really surprised that that's the whole county, because to me that's not going to make much of a dent unless we plan on getting all 20 units in Collingwood and not nobody else.
Sorry, just to clarify, Councillor Ring, that's not the county's full budget. That's incorporating we had the full uptake in Collingwood for this program. So I can get back to council on what the county's full budget is for that program, but
Okay, so I'm sorry.
That's what I can't recall the figure either, but it is fairly
Well, when you
substantial.
said that there was is substantial, but
Yeah.
answering Councillor Perry's question, that 20 is just county-wide, and I thought that's not going to go very far as I'm concerned.
Oh.
We could probably use that in Collingwood alone, but
I think I'll turn to Director Valentine. She might have some information on that.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to the responses from Coordinator Ray, the 20 units is for our pilot project. So setting aside the money to stack with the counties if folks are eligible for the part 2 of the grant that we're proposing. So the 20 really doesn't have relevance to what the county can support. We don't have that number off the top of our heads, certainly, but the county has indicated that this fund has been, underspent every year that they've had it. They're certainly hoping that the additional $10,000 that Collingwood could provide would help uptake for their program. And just to give council a bit of a sense of it, if we got, and I mean, it is quite ambitious, if we got 20 additional ADUs from this program, that would double the amount of our typical ADU building permits for a year in Collingwood. So we're almost thinking it's going to be hard to reach that 20 rather than the other way around. We really hope for a different result. But again, as a pilot project, we'd like to go out and try to increase the incentives for homeowners. And I should have lifted my card at the time, but Councillor Houston, in addition to Coordinator Ray's information on the county's program, the units do have to be affordable for a 15-year period at average market rent or less. And Coordinator Ray shared what the average market rent is. So with that, forgivable loan, the 15-year commitment, registering on title, I think that does make some folks a bit reticent to go to the county grant, and we're hoping to help increase that uptake.
just a quick follow-up then. So, and I'm glad you explained it, because the 20 that we budgeted is just towards our budget for 20. I thought when the way it was answered, I misunderstood the way you
Apologies.
answered it. I thought you meant there was only going to be 20 for the whole county. That's not going to go very far. I'm glad that you clarified that for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Coordinator Ray. I'm delighted with the specifics and more particularly the timelines in this. I think it holds collectively our feet to the fire, and let's get this done. I've got a simple logistic question, and that is, what is the range of the square footage for an ADU, the smallest size permitted versus the largest size permitted?
Sorry, through to Councillor Baines. I don't have that information off the top of my head, but I could certainly provide that in a follow-up.
Or perhaps Director Valentine has that, or?
Certainly, Sue. Yep.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to the councillor. At this time, under Bill 23, which does override any zoning or official plan policies at the local level, we cannot apply a minimum other than Ontario Building Code minimums for the size of an ADU. But we do have a maximum size in our zoning bylaw today, which I believe is 40% of the primary dwelling unit.
Thank you.
Follow up?
No, thank you.
Any further questions from council? Okay. So I'll just add, I think the report's excellent. You've come up with a series of next steps, and that's the process, right? We've got to try to see how we do with this pilot project and go from there. There's a few moving parts. We mentioned Bill 23 and some of those types of things, but it's great that it's coordinated with the county project. I hope that this helps kickstart it a little bit better, and as you said, I'm sure the county will be hopeful of that too. So we have the motion on the table, and no other discussion. So I will call for a vote on all in favor. And that's unanimous. And thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
We'll move to item 6.3, which is C 2023-05, short-term accommodation report. that staff report, no, I'm not going to read the motion in. I'm going to turn to the clerk and we will have a report first.
Thank you, Chair Fryer. So I would actually like to firstly thank council and the public for their patience. This initially hit our radar in 2019. There was another report that was presented in 2020. Council at that time had the foresight to authorize a licensing officer to look at policy analysis and development. And we have been very fortunate to have had the opportunity of Amanda joining our community, who has great experience in policy analysis and development that has facilitated this process over the last year. So with that being said, I won't share any of the good news, but I would like some concluding remarks when Amanda's finished, if that's okay.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and councillors. My name is Amanda Phone, and I am the License and Compliance Officer of the town. And thank you for having me here this evening to speak on the regulatory options for short-term accommodations. Next slide, please. This presentation first provides a bit of a background on short-term accommodations, or STAs for short, followed by an overview of the short-term accommodation public consultation. It then highlights various options and will go into greater detail on the recommendation and next steps for addressing short-term accommodations in Collingwood. Next slide, please. The previous staff report was presented and received by committee and council this past summer, and the public consultation then preceded the direction from council. The town's zoning bylaw generally outlines the rules regarding short-term accommodations, which is that currently the only type permitted is bed and breakfast in town. Next slide, please. A recent scan of the short-term accommodation rental market revealed that Collingwood has 318 operating currently, and of these, 89% occupied the entire home, 11% occupied part of the home, and 70% occupied single-family homes versus 30% occupied multi-family homes. Next slide, please. The public consultation consisted of a survey and an open house, which was marketed in various ways, including a dedicated engage page, which had over 1,400 views. Overall, 574 individuals participated in the survey. The survey included also 2 open-ended questions, which received a total of 514 responses. These comments, in addition to the survey responses, provide important insights into the thoughts of community members. Approximately 50 individuals attended the open house, where guest speakers discussed important considerations for managing STAs. Attendees were asked to ask questions following presentations and participated in an interactive activity, which posed 3 similar questions as were asked on the survey. With respect to who completed the survey, 92% of respondents were residents of town, and they were either year-round or seasonal residents, and 91% indicated they were property owners. Of these property owners, most owned a single detached dwelling, and only 11% indicated having an accessory apartment. Almost half of respondents identified themselves as living currently near an STA, and almost half had experienced issues such as noise, parking, and unruly behavior. Of those, only 15% had contacted the town regarding the issues. So these neighborhood issues were among the most significant concern by respondents, followed by the need to address affordability and availability of long-term housing and rentals in the community. STAs were also highly recognized for providing an increased accommodations options for visitors, while also creating expanded opportunities for residents to earn income to offset the cost of living. Next slide, please. One of the main questions asked in the survey, previous slide. One of the main questions in the survey asked was, would you be comfortable permitting STAs in Collingwood? 56% supported permitting STAs in Collingwood to some extent, compared to 44% who did not feel comfortable permitting STAs. Next slide, please. To gather additional information, the survey then asked respondents, what action do you think the town should take to address STAs? This question was posed on the survey in 2 different ways. Participants could check and apply all that apply in the first question. The second question then asked participants to rank their top 3 preferences so their first and second and third choice. A similar question was posed also at the open house. And so the screen shows the overall results. And overall in the survey and at the open house, both indicated more support for permitting STAs with regulation, such as licensing. Next slide, please. Based on these findings from the public consultation and research of best practices, staff have identified criteria as important considerations for any solution for STAs in Collingwood. They include that any approach should minimize neighborhood issues and respect the character of neighborhoods, should aim to reduce the negative effects of long-term housing and rental supply, protect the safety and health of residents and visitors, support tourism and opportunities for residents to earn income, limit overregulation and aim to create regulatory fairness among all accommodation providers, and lastly, encourage voluntary compliance from users of the program and improve enforcement of STA concerns. The other 3 items listed on the screen stem from other considerations from provincial legislation. So the impacts of Bill 23 are kind of only beginning to be understood by municipalities, including the specifics impacts on short-term accommodations. So this matter will be reevaluated in the next report to council. A municipal accommodation tax may be applied also to transient accommodations, where 50% of the revenue would be shared with a tourism entity in town. Through the survey, 167 respondents supported applying a municipal accommodation tax to short-term accommodations operating in town. And economic development is leading the investigation into a municipal accommodation tax. And this report is anticipated to come forward later in this year. So lastly, another item for consideration is a tool called the Administrative Monetary Penalties, referred to as an AMP. AMP reduces the burden on the court system by moving the municipal tickets out of the courts to a municipal hearing room as more of an administrative review process. Several municipalities have implemented an AMP system to support a licensing bylaw, and Collingwood could consider something similar. Next slide, please. Before deciding on how to enforce, it is important to determine the objective of the enforcement. So what kind of short-term accommodations are beneficial, what should be prohibited, and part of this answer depends on zoning. So 6 policy options are being presented for consideration. Option 1 would continue the current framework where bed and breakfasts are the only permitted short-term accommodation as a home occupation. This would allow up to 3 rooms for rent in a dwelling unit, and 1 room must be reserved for the proprietor. The host is typically present during the rental of a bed and breakfast. Option 2 and 3A are the staff recommended approaches, which I will go into more detail later in the presentation. But as a brief overview, policy option 2 permits STAs as a home-based business, The intent is to accommodate residents interested in renting their homes as an STA while on vacation or away from their property for a short period. Option 3A permits property owners to operate short-term accommodations in accessory units as a home-based business. In this case, the property owner could be present during the rental in their principal residence or the main dwelling unit. Next slide, please. Option 3B expands option 3A, where the host would be the primary resident, such as a long-term tenant, compared to 3A, which requires the host to be the property owner residing in the principal residence. Option 4 permits all STAs as a separate use under the zoning bylaw. Since STAs would not be considered as a home-based business, such as the recommended options, there would not be a requirement for the STA host to be the primary resident, and likely the host would not be present in this case, as it opens up the opportunity for dwellings to be primarily used as short-term accommodation. And option 5 would prohibit all types of STAs, including bed and breakfasts. But this option would not shut down bed and breakfasts that are currently operating, as they would be considered legal non-conforming and would be permitted to operate as such. Next slide, please. And the feasibility of enforcement can determine the effectiveness of any regulatory approach. The current enforcement approach does not appear to be deterring property owners from contravening the zoning bylaw by renting or using their dwelling unit as a short-term accommodation. And it does not appear to align with the community's expectations regarding enforcement. Consultation findings highlighted the need for improved enforcement of short-term accommodation issues, and some respondents also suggested the need for additional bylaw staff. Option A is the recommended enforcement option. Under this option, a license would be required to operate an STA in town. The complexity and scope of the licensing framework are usually tailored to local objectives for addressing STA concerns, as there are various related matters that could be prescribed through a licensing bylaw. Most municipalities use a licensing bylaw as it regulates a large degree of SCA matters that are not covered in a zoning bylaw. And licensing also provides the greatest opportunity for cost recovering through fees and other charges. Option B would require hosts to register with the town and comply with provisions set out in a registration bylaw. Once registered, an STA would remain signed up with the town and the host would not need to pay any fees and renew anything unless their registration is revoked. So there are necessary provisions that are related to the policy options that are being recommended that do require a licensing framework to implement. So this does limit the enforcement tools and mechanisms available under this option. And a complete cost recovery model is not likely under this option as well, because it's only a one-time registration fee that would be collected by the town. And option C would involve an enhanced enforcement approach of town bylaws that are relating to short-term accommodations. And similar to the registration option, that there are necessary provisions through the recommended policy options that do require a licensing framework in order to implement. And under this option, there aren't any cost recovery mechanisms. Next slide, please. Various regulatory approaches were investigated to determine what is appropriate and feasible to implement in town that achieves the desired goals of the community. Staff are supportive of permitting STAs as a home-based business in principal residences and in accessory units where the owner occupies the principal residence, with a licensed bylaw in place to regulate STAs. The recommended approach will allow residents the opportunity to earn income by offering their unit or rooms within their unit for short term, while maintaining the primary residential function of the unit by limiting the use as a home-based business. Since there are restrictions as to what can be regulated through zoning, the most effective way to achieve the desired goals for managing STAs is through a licensing bylaw. Licensing allows for greater monitoring of STAs, and a license can be used to determine whether an STA is operating legally or not. The issuance of a license can be made conditional upon certain criteria, such as the verification of principal residency or a limit of one STA per property. And license holders can be required to adhere to certain standards, such as a maximum occupancy limit, availability of a responsible contact person, and parking requirements. Staff feel that limiting the principal residence and the one STA per property is a step in the right direction to reduce the number of concerns relating to STAs. This may also have the effect of returning some units currently being rented as an STA to the long-term housing or rental supply, such as ones primarily being used as short-term accommodation with no primary residence. If council were to proceed with the licensing bylaw, this option would have the most significant increase in staff time and resources to administer the program compared to the other enforcement options. However, this is the only option that provides the greatest cost that could potentially be greater than the full cost recovery for the licensing program, particularly if the municipal accommodation tax is implemented in the future. And these funds could be reallocated to other town initiatives, such as the affordable housing initiatives. More information will be included in the follow-up report relating to the financials, but it is estimated that at least one new administrative and one new municipal law enforcement officer position would be required to administer and enforce the licensing bylaw and program. There are also other considerations, such as permitting short-term accommodations only in certain residential zones within town or within certain types of residential units, such as single detached dwellings that were not part of this report specifically, but could be considered under any of the policy options. The scope and the complexity of the licensing bylaw is also for consideration, as well as the implementation of AMPS and the municipal accommodation tax to support the regulation of short-term accommodations. Next slide, please. It is recommended that committee support staff's recommendation for managing short-term accommodations. If the recommendation is approved by council, then staff would proceed with drafting bylaw amendments and the licensing framework based on the initial public consultation and a review of municipal best practices. Staff will then report back to council in May, seeking direction to engage the public on the proposed framework and draft bylaws. Following any updates to the drafts, staff will initiate the formal bylaw amendment process in June to seek council's approval of the proposed STA licensing program. If approved, staff would then develop the necessary supporting documents and communications plan to support the implementation of a short-term accommodation licensing program in Collingwood. I'd like to thank you for your time and attention this evening, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that report. At this time, we open up the opportunity for the public to ask questions in regards to this report. So I'll look to the gallery first, and you're welcome to come up, sir, and just identify yourself, and you have 5 minutes if you would like.
Hello, everyone. I'm Trevor. In the report, the 318 homes, was it looked at, of those 318 homes, were they second homes? Were they bedroom listings? It seems like a lot of listings to be taken out of the long-term housing market. 318 properties, I mean, listings, that's a lot when you think about it. 318 families, in fact, but of that, was it calculated bedrooms listings? Was it of bed and breakfasts, or was it second homes to people in the city that wouldn't necessarily rent to long-term tenants, but wanted to just provide an income for themselves? Should I ask my second question or just leave it at there?
So we'll look to Amanda will answer that then. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we, unfortunately, the stats that we have don't specifically look at whether or not there is a resident living on the site where the short-term accommodation is taking place. Unfortunately, like, the listings don't provide that level of detail. However, it was noted that 70% are in single detached dwellings, and 30% are in multi-family units. And then within those as well, we have 89% are, sorry, let me just pull up my notes here. 89% occupied the entire home versus 11% only occupied part of a home. So part of the home is defined as only not necessarily occupying the entire residence. But unfortunately, we don't have the information to determine at this point whether or not it's occupied by a resident or not.
Do you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
Another question regards, it was stated that one listing was permitted per property. If someone were to own a 2-unit and not comfortable having, say, long-term tenants in the basement because of maybe past history, to supplement that income, would they be able to do downstairs but then have a bedroom upstairs? So that would consider two listings, but it would be a bedroom part of your primary unit where you're living, and then an additional unit, like say a bedroom apartment in the basement. Is that what was addressed?
So again, I'll let Amanda answer that, and of course, anything you're asking here, we'll be definitely following up and looking at in detail too. So, go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for your question. Just for my clarification, are you referring to both units being short-term rentals, or the bedroom being like where the property owner is residing, or?
Say there would be one unit short-term rental and one bedroom of the primary units as a separate listing as well.
So currently, with regards to option 3A, the policy option 3A, it's being proposed that the limit of one STA per property, and that is because of the many issues that we currently are facing with neighborhood disruptions, in addition to the fact that we recognize that having multiple renters on a property may also cause disturbances for those who are also renting out those short-term accommodations, let alone, like I mentioned as well, creating neighborhood issues. The other reason, too, for the limit of one STA per property is also to decrease the incentives of a lot of units being converted from long-term rentals into short-term rentals. So that's the idea, to try to limit those financial incentives.
Thank you. Go ahead.
That's everything. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'll just quickly ask, you had raised your hand in the last one, and the public opportunity already had. Has this covered what you wanted to?
It was actually addressed on the 15-year market rent. If you got the loan, it'd be 15 years. It would have to be held at that market rent. That's probably why there hasn't been a lot of permits opened. Mm-hmm. May I suggest a 3-year? It would still encourage homeowners and landlords to do the program, do it 3 years. They might sell in 4 years, and then the next owner might do more market rent or whatever. But it just may be a better approach. That's why there's no permits being pulled for that.
Thank you.
My opinion, of course.
Well, and as I said, anything you've said tonight will be taken into consideration. If you just wouldn't mind giving Robin your full name for our minute records, that would be great. And I'll look to the gallery to see if anyone else would like to speak. Chair Linton? Or you could be coming up as Mr. Linton.
Chair Linton, I believe. Half and half. Thank you again. First of all, I'd like to commend staff on creating such a comprehensive, well-researched, and very thoughtful report, in my opinion. So the Affordable Housing Task Force has not yet made any formal comments or recommendations about how the municipality should tackle the STA issue. We thought, we've discussed it at length, but we thought it was best to let the staff do their research, come to the table with this report, and then we can meet to discuss the staff recommendations in time to provide council with our formal response. So we are having a meeting of our task force on Thursday. This is an agenda item. We will be back to you with a more formal response at that time. One of the things that you know, in our discussions, it's not really well known the extent to which controlling STA properties will have on the availability of longer term rental options. And as a result, rental affordability. As far as I know, there's no really good research or data out there that demonstrates that if you control X number of short-term accommodation properties, you increase your long-term rentals by X amount. And so it's a bit of a crapshoot, I suppose. But as one of the, any regulation, I suspect, will have an impact on long-term availability, but we just don't know how much. But one of the mantras that I think we've learned at the task force over the last couple of years is every little bit counts. And so even if it doesn't have an enormous ground-shaking, earth-shattering impact on the availability of long-term rentals, it will have an impact. There's no question, however, that STA licensing and a regulatory system will be beneficial to dealing with all of the other social and neighborhood issues that exist as a result of the increase in STA activity in Collingwood. I think we only need to look at the Blue Mountains to see the impact on their communities in terms of STAs once they introduce their STA bylaw. Undoubtedly, though, whatever form the regulations take, they will need to be tweaked and updated over time to deal with real life issues. For example, one of the members of our task force read the initial this report and immediately got back to me with a question about property owners. And again, as a real estate broker, I've experienced this myself. Property owners who purchase a Collingwood home and declare it as their principal or primary residence in order to deal with capital gains at some point in the future, where they might be renting their true principal residence in another community. In this case, they would probably qualify under one of the recommended option 2 principal residences. But again, you've got this same situation happening where is it in fact the principal primary residence that's being rented out under the STA bylaw? It may or it may not have an impact. It may be a small number. But again, I think I just use this to bring forward the fact that these bylaws are going to have to be tweaked and modified over time to ensure that they're dealing with truly real life issues. Again, the official response of the Affordable Housing Task Force is on our agenda, and we will come back to you very quickly with a response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know we hadn't mentioned, Councillor Dory pointed out that she's a new member, myself's a new member, and Councillor Ring's a new member. And we thoroughly enjoy and appreciate the conversations that we have at those meetings because that gives us the background that we need to take it further here. So thank you. I'll ask again if there's anybody in the gallery. And that looks like, Trevor, you wanted to just briefly? Thank you.
Might as well bring this up before I head out here. To touch upon the amount of, I guess, neighborhood, for lack of a better word, ruckus, that would go on if the primary owner was at the property and there was 2 people there, as long as there's adequate parking, of course, which is stated on any rental. You'd have control over your property. It wouldn't, you wouldn't put up with noise at nighttime. The property owner would be there, so there'd be much more control. And as a landlord that I just live in my personal house, having someone there long-term sometimes creates a hostile environment, but when you have control, when you can have maybe your in-laws visit, and then when they're not there or when your friends and family aren't there, then you can run at STR in the property at that time. So the 2 listings was, for an example, for the future for my property. And I think anyone would have a lot of control if they're at the property. And he did bring up very good points about, people stating it as a primary residence, but that can always be looked into as well going forward.
Thank you. I then turn to the viewing audience to see if there's anybody who would like to speak.
Chair Fryer, but I do have some comments before we throw the motion on the floor.
Certainly, then you go right ahead.
Certainly. So as we've actually heard from our delegation here this evening, there is dozens of permutations that we've looked at. Originally, our report started around 40 pages, and we're down to 30 pages. To really hone in on what the public survey and responses kind of indicated, together with a background documents. We have, I think it's over 300 pages worth of information that was provided to you in this report. But the principal resident approach is recommended based on this public consultation in consideration of the local context and research around municipal best practices. As you're aware, we haven't permitted them. We can't enforce. Yeah, we have 318. So if we went to a licensing regime, you either have a license or you don't have a license, easily enforced. As you're likely aware, there are strong concerns with local affordable housing and the impacts of STAs on housing stock and the rental inventory. And some municipalities have concluded that when a dwelling unit is offered primarily as an STA, short-term accommodation, or some people refer them as an STR, short-term rental, when there's no primary resident, this does not represent a residential use and is more of a commercial use in nature. So a principal resident approach limits the opportunity for individuals or corporations to use STAs for investment purposes, buying up homes in residential neighborhoods, providing and this approach that we've put forward on having the primary residence does allow the opportunity to earn income to afford the cost of living and to stay in their own homes. So one of the what happened at the open house, if any of you were present, there was conversation between seniors living in their home that need supplemental income. There was young professionals coming to the area, noting that they can only afford a house if they're able to have some supplemental income and able to not have a long-term rental permanently, for the exact point, as the delegation had noted today, that they do have the ability when they do have family or guests of their own come over, they are able to do that. Significant nuisances and impacts on neighborhoods can also arise from properties with absent owners, and staff feel that a primary resident would have more care and control over the nuisances and will try to ensure no disruptions to their own neighborhood and to their own peace and enjoyment. Staff firmly believe that the primary resident approach under licensing regime is the best step forward, understanding that it is recommended to have a licensing officer and enforcement officer. And the reason why we're suggesting that is right now we know that our bylaw department is at capacity, but we feel the importance of having a licensing regime in place. So we think that is appropriate. If we'd have the licensing program, we do feel that we could be self-sufficient. And as noted, our economic development office is looking at bringing forward a municipal accommodation tax report in the near future, and has indicated that there is a potential for some significant revenues that would further offset the costs. As we're seeing in the town Blue Mountains, they're actually at a surplus at this point moving forward. But it's a tough balance. It was a very tough analysis. So I appreciate the efforts that Amanda and Manager Herod had in going through that, on knowing the affordability housing crisis in the community and trying to come up with a happy medium.
Thank you, and thank you for that additional clarification, and that was very good. I might even look to the CAO in case she would like to add anything. It's the kind of topic that more clarification, the better, obviously.
Thank you, Chair. I think this policy proposal splits the hair in the right place, and we've heard some good comments from the community, so there's still opportunity to take into account what council's asked and the community has said. I like how this proposal has come forward, because it's not a done deal with all the details filled out. Really, this is what path do you want to be on? And given if you choose a path tonight and then ratify it at council, we'll be able to go down whichever path you choose and bring back the details to council. So there'll be another chance to endorse the final approaches before they become real. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to read in the motion. I'll read in the full motion. I recognize we still have to discuss it as members, and if we need to make any adjustment, we will. But as proposed, it is the staff recommendations that are part of this motion. That staff report number C 2023-05, dated February 6, 2022, regulatory options for short-term accommodations be received for information, and that council directs staff to prepare a follow-up staff report to be considered not later than May 2023, including potential next steps, draft bylaws, and framework governing STAs as may be required based on the following suggested option. Staff recommendation is STA licensing bylaw enforcement option A be applied with the following policy options. Option number 2, permit in principal residence of the property owner includes bed and breakfast, and option number 3A, permit an accessory unit where the principal resident is occupied by the property owner. And further, that council support a further public consultation following the development of the draft STA licensing program prior to final consideration and implementation. I would look to the floor for a mover, Councillor Doherty, and seconder, Councillor Houston, and I'll open it up for comments. Councillor Ring, I think.
Yeah, originally well, I've got a lot of concerns, to be honest with you. I know this is just it's for consideration right now, and nothing will be fine when we leave here tonight. But I just wanted to make a comment that anything, I have some concerns with anything when we're renting out any form of ADUs, accessory dwelling units for STAs, if you want to keep using acronyms for the short-term accommodations. I think our biggest problem in town is for affordable housing, and the more things we take off the market for long-term rentals, I think is not going to be good for ours. I appreciate the town staff report, and they've done a lot of work. And there's I'm not saying I can't support it all, but there's things I'm going to have some concerns about, and I'm glad that it's on our agenda for Thursday's meeting with the Affordable Housing Task Force, because I'm sure we'll get a better gauge on the feeling of the task force when it comes to the affordable housing side of it.
Thank you. Councillor Perry?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Almost called you Mayor. Deputy Mayor Fryer. My understanding is there are 318 unlicensed or unregistered STAs right now. If the licensing goes through, how is that going to be enforced? I mean, if we're having trouble right now with 318, how are we going to enforce it if it does become, if it does pass that we do have licensing for them? I'm not sure who would answer that question, but I'm throwing it out
Start
there.
with Clerk Thomas, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Fryer. To answer Councillor Perry's question, I'll start off, and then Manager Hare could jump in. Right now, the issue is, number one, the burden of proof confirming that they are being used for an STA. Even though they may have a listing, if we're not renting it, there's those that are renting it have been advised by the property owner to confirm if anybody comes to their home, they're a family or a friend, they're not renting it for STA purposes. If it does come up that they have been renting it, to have them appear in court to confirm that it is an STA when we need witnesses to confirm that information. Nobody's coming back to Collingwood to go to court to prove that their rental individual was offering an inappropriate or of STA in contravention of the licensing bylaw. It's much simpler if there's a licensing regime, because you're either licensed or you're not licensed. And so then we can address it in that format, and maybe the remainder of the comments I'll leave to Manager Harrod as our enforcement specialist.
Go ahead, Manager Harrod. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Councillor Perry. So through licensing, you can have requirements, to add to Sarah's comments, you can have requirements that if a property is being used as a short-term accommodation, you can require licensing to be put in the advertisement, and somebody not listing that could be a contravention to the licensing bylaw. as of kind of right now, like Clerk Gomez has indicated, trying to prove right now and trying to prove that a property is being used as a short-term accommodation is very difficult. We require individuals to attend court to testify that they were using that property for that specific purpose. And again, it's very difficult, especially somebody living a distance, to force them to come to court. Sometimes they're reluctant to even speak to an officer that's attending the property to confirm whether or not they are actually renting it out for that purpose. The other issue is when you go to the property, not being able to speak to anyone at the property. You see a listing online, and it is very frustrating as a kind of enforcement agency to try to, we get these calls all the time. Why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you doing more? It's because we can't. So a licensing bylaw would allow us to do more and to streamline the enforcement process.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm not sure this would be directed to Clerk Almus or perhaps to Amanda. First of all, I would share my friend Councillor Ring's concern about ADUs being used as STAs. I think that is counterproductive to what this initiative on the Affordable Housing Task Force is, but I'll leave that for a later date. But this is a specific question. If I built an ADU for long-term rentals, could I then turn around and rent my primary residence out as an STA? Thereby, my neighbors on both sides would be faced with tenants, if you will, on my property.
Did we follow the question? So I'll turn to Amanda then.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your question. The specific details of the bylaws will be brought forward in the next staff report. But definitely that's something that we have talked amongst staff about. Certainly that's a consideration. We understand, to some of the points that I've said earlier, obviously we understand we don't want to disrupt neighbors. That's one of the concerns that we're addressing through licensing, is to reduce the neighborhood impacts of STAs. Part of the reason also maintaining the principal residence approach is to ensure that there's kind of more accountability in the neighborhood. So we definitely don't want to disturb long-term residents, long-term tenants in the community. That's why we're trying to keep the benefits within the community and among residents. So certainly that will be a consideration in the follow-up staff report, but that has been a top of mind.
Thank you.
And I'll just ask if Clerk Thomas would like to add anything.
Certainly, and I appreciate that comment, and I do appreciate the concern about the impacting on ADUs moving forward. And we did have the conversation of the irony of having an ADU program coming forward at the same time we're bringing this forward. But if you're using the ADU program, you would not be eligible for an STA purpose. But as you can see from the information from the statistics that we retained on STAs in the town of Collingwood, 70% are single family dwellings. So most of them are single dwellings. People are buying investment properties, coming to town, using them for that purpose. And so we do, and I appreciate one of the items that I'm sure will come up too with the Affordable Housing Task Force is the burden of proof on confirming that it is a primary residence. And that is something that we've actually had a conversation with our legal about as well. We can't base it on a driver's license. We can't base it on a tax bill. We're going to have attestations or statutory declarations put on the individuals and random inspections happening. So we're looking at different approaches, and honestly, I think this, depending on council's support moving forward, I think this could be a program that's looked at by many municipalities that are in similar situations as we are, by location, as a good outcome for affordable housing purpose.
Follow up?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. So I just have one or two questions and one or two comments. So my first question is, are you envisioning that this regulation would continue to be exclusive to single-family dwellings?
I'll turn to Amanda for that at this stage.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is something that I mentioned along with potentially limiting to certain residential zones as well. That will be brought forward in the next report in the draft bylaws for consideration, and also will be part of the next public consultation. That's something that was not included in the initial public consultation, but certainly in drafting, it'll form an important component. So, and just in talking with staff in planning, we certainly feel that that's a component that should be for the next public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Because I just, I'm generally very supportive of this direction for our community. But when I think of how many townhomes and duplexes we now have proliferating within the town, the same principles could certainly apply. If an STA were to be permitted under these conditions in that kind of a unit. And then I guess the other thing I'm thinking is, how many condominiums, apartment condominiums we have in this community where we may have people who might wish to take advantage of this legalized program. So that's just as a comment. If I could just add some thoughts, I'm just wondering if it would be possible when we consider the final bylaw that we might consider regulating the number or the percent of STAs in a neighborhood. Or also perhaps like the number in a block or the distance between or some such. And I'm saying this because I am aware of one neighborhood in town where there were apparently 6 full-time STAs in a row in this neighborhood. So it was resident nightmare times 6. And then the final comment I will make is the whole notion of an occupancy tax or a rental tax, I think is an excellent idea, not just for residential short-term accommodations, but also for commercial, our hotels and motels, as a means of, in my view, 2 things. First of all, offsetting the cost of administrating this program over and above licensing, but so that the funds could perhaps be directed into our affordable housing reserve. It just, and then that way would help to, offset whatever potential negative impacts that such a legalized program might have on our availability of affordable housing. But just for clarification before I leave that point, and this would be, I guess, through you to the clerk, the Municipal Act provides that these taxes can only be applied or only be used for tourism applications. So is there a way in which we could direct the revenues toward our affordable housing program?
Okay, Clerk Gomez.
Certainly, we've looked at that. I think the funds that would come from municipal accommodation tax, MAT tax, would they have to go to cover the cost to administer the program, in addition to going towards tourism requirements, and there is a various percentage, and that will be coming forward in the manager's report. However, I believe when we were chatting, and I thank actually the planning department and economic development for their assistance in the report. They went through it and assisted on a few items and reviewed it in detail with staff over the last a couple months. So I believe that what he had indicated was 50% had to be allocated toward tourism entity or purposes, but then 50% could be for cost recovery of the administration of the program. So the program that's either administered, the licensing component through STAs, or the program that finance would have to put in place for the collection of it.
Okay.
I'll just maybe add, because it's something I had on mine as well, and I thought that generally the reference was that it was for a nonprofit agency relating to tourism, and my thought immediately turned to the BIA, whether there was something there that could work out. So it's on the radar, I guess, is what the answer is. Had you wanted to add something, CEO?
Know that the planning department and economic development had started to look into this. I think they have some immediate clarifications for us at the Director Valentine.
Well, Director Valentine?
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So our early investigations of the MAT program indicate that 50% of the revenues would need to be allocated towards a not-for-profit tourism partner, but the other 50% could be used generally unilaterally by the municipality. It doesn't have to be for an STA program. It could be for housing. It could be for other matters as identified by the municipality. So although it could that 50% could be used towards supplementing the costs of the program that Ms. Phone went through, it could also be used for other matters, including affordable housing. That's our current understanding.
Very good. Excellent. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Potts.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Fryer. I have lots of concerns regarding the STAs. I guess my first question is the license is it like a one-time license, or when you go and apply for a license, is it just once and you're good to go? That's just my first question.
Okay, I'll turn to Amanda for her answer on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the specific components of the licensing bylaw are not yet worked out, but in looking at other municipalities and what generally distinguishes a licensing framework from a registration framework is that it's a renewal. So typically, whether that's on an annual or multi-year basis, but that's what distinguishes, like I said, a licensing framework from a one-time registration kind of bylaw.
So if I may comment, if the route would be a licensing is required, I would suggest or think that a renewal yearly, that would give an opportunity for any neighborhoods or surrounding areas to be surveyed, or notices to go out to kind of review, a year in review. That allows the town to take a look at any issues that maybe had come up on the noted properties, and also at the same time it may give feedback that being in a neighborhood you would probably know whether the primary owner was living there or not. It's just a good just a good way to monitor it and to hold the homeowners accountable. But I do note that I do have a lot of concerns with STAs. So thanks.
Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I have two questions, I think, and then a few comments. I just want to start with saying that I completely understand and agree that affordability is our number one issue here. But I do want to say that I thought this was a great report and great recommendation by staff for next steps. So I'll start with the questions, maybe one at a time here. The first, maybe a clarification to the clerk. You had mentioned not being able to use a tax bill as to be able to identify a residence. I'm of the understanding that there are other communities that do that. Is there, what was the reasoning behind that?
Go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. You can use a tax bill, but that doesn't prove that that's your primary residence. So that was our only concern. We could ask for that together with some of the other components to ensure, permanent residency, but we couldn't strictly depend on it.
Okay. Okay. The second question would be, and this may be a difficult one to answer right away. Just curious if there were any examples of communities that moved in the opposite direction and made STAs completely illegal through their bylaws, and if there was statistics around how that impacted affordability on housing.
Who would like to take that tough question? Amanda, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I don't have that information at hand, but I certainly can provide that in a follow-up. However, in doing research, there are very limited municipalities in Ontario that are currently prohibiting short-term accommodations just because of all of the challenges that we've kind of gone over today in today's meeting, including the enforcement challenges, as well as proving kind of that, the use is not carrying on. It's very difficult with all the nuances of the zoning provisions typically associated with a prohibition, as we know here with the challenges that we're currently facing. So as I said, there are very, very few municipalities, and in talking with others, most are currently reviewing and shifting away from a prohibition towards licensing or some sort of regulation.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I was curious about that was that with the fact that they are currently illegal in our community, I'm just curious of, I mean, we already have 300 units that aren't available as affordable units anyways, even though this is illegal. So I'm unsure of how much of an impact this would be as a whole on affordability if we move to this licensing model that we're talking about. Because I do also see some added benefits here, as was already pointed out, through the potential of taxation to then be able to move that money back into our efforts of affordability. So I just wanted to make that comment there. And I think having the homeowners on site is a great way of accountability for anybody who is operating an STA. I think the other comment that I had was that given the impacts of interest rates in the last year, I do know quite a few homeowners that have been looking at this as an opportunity to help offset their costs to be able to stay in their homes. So I think that might be an important consideration as we talk about the impacts of the STAs and possibly allowing these for residents in our community to be able to continue affording their mortgages. That's all I had.
Okay. Any further comments from councillors? I'll just add a few thoughts. And first off, that's one of the considerations I'm having in my mind right now, too, is that it's affordability as well for some of these homeowners that wouldn't be able to afford if they couldn't have this rental option. I do strongly believe that status quo isn't an option because we obviously have 300 and plus, and that probably isn't complete. Like I'm sure that there's other ways that they advertise that we haven't been able to determine. But it comes back to the earlier apology that the clerk issued at the beginning about this taking time to get here. It's a long process in order to get it and look at it fully. And I kind of think there's benefits to be looking at this at the same time we're looking at the rapid ADU because we're considering both elements of it. And again, we have a great resource in the task force to help us along in that regard. A couple of specific comments was in regards to the certain zones. I was amazed when I saw the map because it's all over Collingwood. I do believe, in looking at my research a little bit, the town of Mountains is a little bit of a different case because they have particular pockets that this was prevalent and they've been able to do those. I do like the idea of considering limiting the percentage in the area that might help us with the uptake and the quicker uptake to people recognizing the benefit to getting licensed. But I too realize that there's quite a bit still to be worked out here that will make me feel comfortable that we've got all the measures in place that we can. And most likely we won't have everything at the initial stage because it is a process. But I think somebody else had mentioned how it's going to take some tweaking along the way as well to get it right. So, Councillor Ring, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd just like to add, and don't get me wrong, I'm appreciative of the report, and I can see some validity in it, but I'm still having a hard time. We're making rationale for the report, saying that there's people that are using it to offset their mortgages, and we've got a lot more people that can't afford rent, and we don't seem to find any way to find rationale to find them accommodations. It's I'm not going to say it is a bit disturbing to me, but maybe I'm missing something. I think that I know we're going to do whatever we can in our power to do what's best for affordable housing, but there's some things with this report that we're trying to accommodate people so that they can make money off of their short-term rental units, as opposed to finding the same place for long-term rentals. It's just find it a little bit ironic and maybe a little bit disturbing.
Well, no, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? You're saying there's good parts to this, but we've got to have these concerns too. So it's the other part of this process is it's not yet, it's still going to go to the public one more time too. So you can be sure that if we're talking and we have all these different ideas, the public will too. If we can get it down a little bit refined and get it out to the public and get their comments, and hopefully there's a way to deal with all the issues in some fashion. But that's great. If anybody else would like to, all good then. I've read the motion, the full motion, yes, okay, and we have our seconder and our motion mover and seconder. So at this point in time, I call for vote on the report receiving. And that's unanimous. Thank you. So we will, unless somebody needs to have a break, I think I'm going to continue to move along. So item 6.4, CAO 2023-04, operational plan update. And this is 2022 year end and 2023 year start. And I will actually turn to the CAO in regards to this report.
Thank you, Chair. There is a deck that is going to come up, but I'll start as, oh, there, it's already up. This is the operational plan. I'm going to talk about what one is. And we're looking at the 2022 accomplishments just to show how the year is finished. And we're also looking at setting ourselves up for this year now that you've voted on the budget. I think you've seen tonight and maybe through the budget period that we have some exceptional staff here. We're very lucky, in my opinion, that we can rely on them to provide good quality advice and then have the ship steered by the council members. Next slide. So hopefully this is a familiar one for most folks. This is our community-based vision. And it talks, there's intention through the budget to update not only update, but renew the strategic plan in 2023. So there's a good chance that some of this might be updated. But basically, we're always looking in everything that we do to filter it through moving toward this vision. And it talks about, for residents and visitors, a healthy lifestyle, activities in beautiful and safe settings, active transportation, inclusive, multi-generational, artful, civic pride, animated waterfront, and goes on from there. So this is a very, very important statement. I think about it as a north arrow where council and the community, where council with community input says that we're going. And it is the tip of an umbrella on over $130 million that council is directing to various initiatives in the community for the next year. And it's very important, particularly in a municipality, that we have a great vision because the playing field is very broad. The Municipal Act says that council can do a wide swath of things if that's what you wish to do in the community. Next slide, please. So this one's a little complicated, and now that I sit here with my glasses off and I see it up on the screen, it's also very small, but I'm going to talk you through it just briefly because it talks a bit about the philosophy and how we're running the municipality. So at the top, in the very green box at the very beginning, it's the vision. So that's the tip of the umbrella, and that's where the town wants to end up. And then the 5 darker green bubbles, and this deck is also posted in the agenda after the meeting if it's not there already and someone wants to look at it in more detail. It talks about the strategic plan objectives. So these were the ones set in the last council in 2020. And this is about where the town is focusing your transformation efforts. So these are the things like connections to the waterfront and managing growth that we're doing to be the most important 5 things that council said, if we transform these, we're going to drive ourselves toward the vision. And this is the complicated part. When you go down to the next set of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bubbles there, these are the programs and services that the town delivers. So this is all of our work. Not just the things that we're trying to transform, but everything we do. And we have our master plans in there in our day-to-day work. We're doing a lot of thinking this year and developing those services further. I'm going to go now to the next slide. So we try to, from a staff perspective, implement what council's asking us to do within a strategic framework. So up at the top again is the vision. The next layer in this blue pyramid is that the strategic transformations are delivered. So those 5 things that council said, transform on making these better, those are the next things that we look at. Then the next layer in this pyramid is all of our town programs and services being improved and delivered. And then our annual operational plan includes those 2 layers that are shown within the it's sort of a red bracket on the left side. So it's the strategic transformation and then the ongoing delivery of programs and services. And then if we keep going down for completeness, we have individual staff delivering their annual performance plans, and collectively the community is experiencing these things that you've invested your $130 million plus in. And then depending on how they have, what kind of experience they have and how the results, we have corporate performance reporting on how we're doing against the vision. So the next slide, slide 5, talks about our operational plan framework. So within our operational plan, I mentioned that we put in things that are strategic in nature as well as ongoing in nature. We've only been doing this for, I think, 2 complete years, actually not even quite 2 complete years yet. We're still somewhat in the piloting stage. But what we do put in the operational plan has these 4 criteria that are in that first section up there. If it's a council resolution that needs staff action, we put it in. We know you want to see what's happening with your resolutions, and we know the community wants to see that. If it has a significant mention in the budget, including our capital items, we put it in. If it's going to need to come to council for a decision, we put it in because it's something that's tracking toward a public decision. And if it's a project, so it has a start and an end date, and it's taking more than 3 person weeks of time, we put it in because it's a significant chunk of work. But even with all that information, even with all that in there, there's a pile of things that are not in. I would say it's probably 90% of the stuff that we do. And those are the ongoing things. The plowing of the snow, the delivering of rec programs, our water treatment, our development applications, those ongoing things we do all the time are not part of this plan. We'd like to do some more work on that, but that's not what you're going to see here today. On slide 6, I want to talk about why we do this. So we do it to enhance collaboration. Manager Carter, Krista Carter, was here talking about communications a little in an earlier meeting today, corporate and community services. And she talked about, for all these projects, knowing which ones require communication support, knowing which ones require procurement. And that helps us to align what we're doing and to make sure it's reasonable when we suggest it to you, to cross-department supports. And it does improve our focus on the town's overall priorities. We set out together, and you can look at what's a high priority, for example, the things we're really going to drive. And I think it provides transparency and communication with council. Council has a very distinct role. You're steering this ship, and the public needs to know, of course, they've elected you to steer this ship. You're looking at the overall policies, the overall strategies, how we're going to spend our money. And I, as a CAO, make sure that your directions get carried out. But I know that you need to know things are happening. You don't want to hear 7 months down the pipe that the thing that you wanted to get done hasn't been started. And that's what this does. It provides a level of transparency so that you can see that staff, our wonderful staff, which is where I started, are doing the things that need to be done in a timely fashion. This is a progressive and not a punitive tool. This is not a tool where we, as you may have experienced performance planning in the past, where people are being banged over the head with what they didn't get done, whether it was reasonable or not to begin with. This is a progressive communication tool that in Collingwood we're using to drive the great things happening that you want to happen. Next slide, please. So 2022, I know you came on, some of you were here for all of 2022 and some came on in November. At the year start in our operational plan, we had 350 items on the plan. There were some things added in year. They were either surprises that council had to deal with or just things that came up. We did cancel some items for various reasons, but in the end of the year, we marked as complete 271 items, which I think is excellent performance for a municipality. We've been doing, in my opinion, and I guess others will judge, but a good job of setting out what is important and getting them done. It builds pride and accountability. You know if expectations are met, and council can continue to prioritize work. And it's a little bit of the duck on the pond. It looks pretty serene, but underwater there's a lot of feet pedaling, and this helps you to see those feet pedaling and helps the public to see that as well. Next slide. There are 4 slides of operational plan highlights from 2022. I am not going to read them all out. There is a full appendix that lists the 270 plus items. I am just going to mention a couple as highlights. Water supply and pipeline agreements with New Tecumseh happened. Policy for access to affordable recreation, that's very timely. I think if kids and adults are not able to access our recreation, we have ways for you to apply to get the funding to do so. We had the Maple Street Bike Priority Pilot that led to changes on how council would see that implemented, so we could implement it this year. We've got a lovely field house at Fisher Field and a world-class playground at Sunset Point. If you haven't been there, you should go. Maybe bring a kid so you can really see the joy on their faces. Next slide, 2 of 4 from last year. The Tremont Public Art Commission, the Dare to Dream rhino with the balloons, which is so beautiful. We had the Collingwood Police Building roof replacement. That's a town building for the town's police force. A collective agreement negotiation with IBEW, the water side. Core assets asset management plan. A community greenhouse gas inventory. And we're making very positive progress on the grain terminals revitalization. So there was a public report back after an in-camera discussion recently that indicated we should be out for public consultation soon. Next slide. Slide 3 of 2022. I'll just mention the judicial inquiry follow-up from earlier tonight is essentially done, we believe, pending final vote at council around the staff code of conduct. We have a business accelerator in Collingwood with much support from our council. Our transit service provider procurement and our on-demand software are both in flight and being implemented. And the final 2022 operational plan highlights are here on the next slide. And there's a few things added in year. We did end up doing the servicing capacity update and the proposed short-term exemption program updates. We had some changes to seasonal paid parking and free resident parking, I want to add. So we were able to implement that with what was quite new for municipalities, which is an electronic approach where residents can register their own plates so that they don't have to pay for parking on the water area. And for 2023, in the report that's been presented to council and the public, we have 312 items. If you go read them all and count them all up, 19 of them are on hold for various reasons. We're waiting for someone or something, maybe a grant or things like that. A few of these include the update of our official plan, a process and fees review for development. That's a very important review because it helps us to right size what our fees should be such that we can afford the staff and reviews that are needed. Our hopefully lifting of the interim control bylaw will happen this year, August or earlier. Agreement for the Poplar Regional Health and Wellness Village, MZO area. We've got Mountain Road widening, getting the land ready to go. Lots of provincial changes that will react to Bills 109 and 23. You heard about affordable housing tonight. The second slide, and I think second slide for 2023, items that are noted, a master plan for information technology. We're very much electronic municipality. This is an important piece of work that is going well. You'll see soon. Our HR master plan, our greenhouse gases reduction pathway feasibility study, work at the wastewater treatment plant digester roof, an update of the community-based strategic plan that I'm so excited to start with you in the community. Lots of work on LED lighting retrofits, fire master plan. Manager Carter had mentioned the public engagement strategy review and refreshing. Customer service standards updates with some software supports for those are coming through. And on the next slide, and the last one for 2023, we have the resolution of the Culbert estate, and which was left to the town and two other beneficiaries. The transportation master plan, there's lots of thinking happening there with respect to active transportation, trails, speeds, etc. Next steps for an arts center in Collingwood, more grain terminals, several more steps. An inflow and infiltration reduction approach study, which is about wastewater. We have concerns about the capacity of the plant, but the capacity can be extended by reducing the infiltration of rainwater, for example, into that into the incoming water into the plant. The trees consulting report that looks at how we manage trees on public and private property and during developments, and of course short-term accommodations you've already heard this evening. So our ongoing intentions, and there is an appendix in the report that lists everything if you want to read in more detail. On the ongoing perspective, we come each quarter to council, probably for a little bit of a shorter report, but just lets you know, particularly in the appendices, how everything is going with those 312 or so items and any new resolutions council's made in the interim. So we usually come 1 month after the end of the quarter. So we've got time to get the data together. It does show that council, yes, things are happening while maintaining the staff independence to do so. One final thing I'll mention as we get to the thank you slide at the end is we do have resolutions from at least one, if not two previous councils ago that we don't know whether they remain a priority of this council. And in some cases, we'd like to clean them up and incorporate them with the projects that where they belong. We have one or two around trees, for example, and now that we have the tree study underway, we'd like to say, yes, these have been, incorporated in the tree study. So this, pardon me, the last piece of the resolutions motion suggested for you tonight suggests that you might want staff to come back and suggest some of the previous resolutions that you might want to clean up. Of course, you can see in the listing then and also in one quarter when we come back that there might be some that are your priorities are not moving forward as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, CEO Skinner. I will turn to the gallery and see if there's anyone, and there's not. I'll turn to anyone viewing, and there's not. So at this point in time, I'll read in the motion. That staff report CAO 2023-04, 2022 operational plan accomplishments and 2023 year start operational plan, and that staff review and report back on previous council resolutions that have started or been incorporated into other initiatives for reconsideration with the Q2 status update in May 2023. I'd ask for a mover and a seconder. There's Councillor Baines and Councillor Perry. And I'll open it up for anyone who would like to speak to. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor Fryer. Kudos to each and every staff member and yourself, CAO, for quite a year. My goodness gracious, or at least an update of the year in progress. Very impressive and very thorough. So thanks to all involved.
Other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Dory.
Thank you. I will just say that I love this report. I've seen this. I think this is the fourth one that I've seen. And yeah, I love it for a couple of reasons. First of all, we meet on a weekly basis. We make all kinds of resolutions, and somewhere to see them all captured is really important for me, with a memory like a sieve. But the other thing is that we can see what progress is being made. And I understand that as time goes by, we may also be able to look ourselves and see updates on these various projects in real time, which would be fantastic. So thank you very much to staff, and we've got a little bit of work ahead of us this year, and I'll look forward to moving it along.
Anyone else? I'll just add that yes, it's an extensive tool, and through the council portal you can look things up very quickly if you need to, and I think that saves a lot of time and effort from everybody in that regards. And I do like the idea of the review because the time changes things as well, not just the makeup of this body. So I'm looking forward to that thing. So just clarification, is there, if we see some items in regards to that, should we send them in to you?
So thank you. We will do pull out all of the resolutions so that they're all in one list and come back in the second quarter. What I would say at any point, senior staff always like to hear from council members. If there's certain ones that you're finding already are not as high a priority, or certain ones that you think are really high priority, we're always happy to take that information, and then we'll provide the overall recommendations to all council members, and you can have a robust discussion at the second quarter report.
So that's just one of those items that it's an opportunity for council to share information back to staff, not trying to generate conversation or anything like that. Just the more food for thought you have, the better. Yeah.
Yes, we like to hear what you're hearing from the community. It's always helpful. Thank you.
Great. So if there's not anyone who would like to add any more, did you have something else you would like to say?
I forgot to say a profound thank you to Shelby Verkint, who's my executive assistant and has done a lot of work to put this thorough information together, and also to the department heads and each of the managers who update the database regularly to keep it vibrant and accurate for council and ourselves. Thank you.
I echo that, and I'll guarantee you, if you didn't do it, you'd be dealing with a whole bunch of questions from us. So again, thank you. So we have that motion on the table. I'll call it to vote then. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Move on to 6.5, C 2023-07, review pilot, external agency organization participants on advisory committees. That staff report, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to turn to the clerk first before I read that in, and you can say something.
Certainly. I don't have a formal presentation. This is pretty self-explanatory. Back in 2021, we had presented a report to council regarding external participants, actually council committee and board composition in general, and that included the review of external organizations that sit and participate on those various committees. As part of the review, a pilot program was put forward after the advisory committee's extra support and resources by permitting non-voting external agencies and organization participation. During the pilot, the Collingwood Heritage Committee appointed 2 external organizations, which was a representative of Downtown Collingwood BIA and a representative of the Architecture Conservancy of Ontario, the Collingwood branch. No other committees took advantage of this pilot, even though we did offer that. However, we understand that if council considers moving forward with this, there may be other interests, in particular to our Trails and Active Transportation Committee. As part of the review of this pilot, a survey was sent out to all the advisory committee members and staff resources that support the advisory committees. There was 22 responses received of the 28 that were provided the survey, with the majority of the responses in favor of maintaining the ability to appoint a non-voting external agency or organization to its committee. To assist in providing a clear understanding of the role of an external representative has on the committee, a protocol has been drafted and is attached as Appendix A to the staff report. This protocol outlines the length an external representative can participate on a committee, which is now consistent with the term of a voting member appointed to the committee who approves the appointment of the external representative, the ability to appoint an external representative on an ad hoc basis to assist with a specific project, and it clearly sets out the appropriate level of participation at meetings to ensure effective and efficient discussion and meeting management. With the feedback from the survey, to continue with the ability to appoint external representation as non-voting members to advisory committees, and the updated protocol to address both opportunities and challenges experienced during the pilot, staff are requesting that council endorse the continuance of this pilot on a permanent basis. As with any program, it will be continually monitored from time to time with any further recommendations to improve or eliminate the program be provided at a future date. And I should say it is interesting to note there was questions coming up as a result of the initial implementation of the pilot about whether the individual should be a voting member or non-voting member. And of the survey response, there was 86% found benefit of having the external participant and their expertise on the committee, but 82% felt they shouldn't have voting rights. So we kept with the protocol, and that's what we're recommending today.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to the public in the gallery, and no, there's nothing. And there's no one in the viewing. So we will put this on the floor. That staff report C 2023-07 titled Review of Pilot Regarding Non-Voting External Agency Organization Participation on the Various Advisory Committees be received, and that council approved the recommendation to implement the ability of external agencies to continue to participate as non-voting members on the advisory committees, subject to the participation protocol set out by the clerk as Appendix A of this report. I'd look for a mover. Councillor Ring, and seconder, Councillor Perry. And I will open that to the floor for Councillor Baines. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just a quick clarification, Deputy Mayor, to the clerk. On the second statistic you cited, the ad hoc, temporarily appointed or whatever resources did not want the vote or to become a voting member. Was that correct? Or the committee did not want them to be a voting member?
All those that were participating in the survey, so all the existing members of committees were provided the survey, and 82% said that they felt strongly that they shouldn't have a voting privilege for various reasons, such as, they have a very specific interest. Some could be in a conflict at times, but they do have a great
Thank you.
expertise.
And I quite agree, and I've attended a similar function with other committees as a resource, and I fully support this. I think it's a wonderful initiative.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty?
Thank you, Chair. Very much in agreement with this recommendation. Everything that I have heard from various committee members is that, in fact, it has been working very well. Something's been on my mind for some time, and this might be the forum to introduce it. And that is the notion of instituting, or in fact, I should say reinstituting, a place for a member of council on our committees. We do now, I guess based on provincial legislation, have a member of council representative on our library committee and on our museum committee, but not on any of the other ones. And I see this as being very advantageous to the committees in that they get to have one member of council who becomes an expert in their subject matter and an advocate for their policies and proposals around the council table. Also, it would tend to bridge, if we have a committee that's interdepartmental, then we could, the member of council sort of becomes the bridge between the interdepartmental influence. And I'm thinking in particular, say, trails and active transportation. So what I would like to do is provide notice that I will come back with a motion, and I will work with the clerk to draft a motion to come forward and hopefully not too long with a proposal to add a member of council to some or all of our committees.
I'll turn to Clerk Thomas and ask if there's any comment you'd like to make at this time.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Fryer. We would have to consider that under other business because we're in the middle of voting on this report, but we could work with you. We did have members of council sitting within some advisory committees previously, and then there was concerns with capacity, and we do have a number of committees right now. So depending on how much we can spread you thinly and not make one committee more important than another committee, there is a number of things that do need to be considered in an analysis for that. So that if council wanted to entertain that.
Okay. So did you have anything follow up in regards to the report, or is that?
No, the clerk's right. I should wait until other business, but this was, I thought, an appropriate time to introduce the thought anyway.
Okay, Councillor Baines, I think you wanted to.
Under the circumstances, I'll speak to this under other business.
Okay. Is anyone else wishing to speak to? Okay, so that's great. We have this item on the floor then, and I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. So we move on to departmental updates and discussion, which we don't have any of. And this is the opportunity to welcome anybody from the gallery here or the viewing audience to address us if they would like for 5 minutes.
We do have one attendee who has not raised their hand previously, but this is an open forum for any item within the Strategic Initiative Committee's mandate to address the standing committee. Pressing the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Not at this time.
Okay, so we will move to other business. And Councillor Baines?
Well, I would just speak to Councillor Councillor Doherty's potential motion and support that, in that when I sat for 4 years in the Committee of Adjustment, there were circumstances that arose where we had to send sort of a message to council, particularly in this case about the drainage issue on Niagara Street and others particularly. And it was challenging not being able to what should I say, pass on to council the frustration and indeed the anger that so many residents were resting upon your poor members of the Committee of Adjustment. It was sort of apples and oranges in the sense that how could the town, through the Committee of Adjustment, approve this severance application when it would just be adding to the problem of water, which was a chronic issue. And we had to say, guys, it's not our responsibility. We just have to look specifically at the legislation that allows this. The water drainage issue is a separate issue. You really have to go talk to council about that. Well, so we tried to express that as well as best we could. I would say that had a council member been a member of that Committee of Adjustment, particularly in that issue and another one in regard to overflow of sewage that happens consistently up at Collins and St. Marie, the message gets delivered, if you will, directly to council. And I think as a healthy forum, perhaps, it would be worth consideration and discussion. I am cognizant of what the clerk says, particularly in regard to people's time. Committee of Adjustment was meeting once a month on average, an hour and a half or so. So I think it's worthy of the discussion. That's all I'll say. And in that case, I would support Councillor Doherty's motion, should she make this.
So you'll be discussing that, I'm sure, offline and as you say, with clerk services. So anyone else under other business? That being said, then I would look for someone to move adjournment. Councillor Potts, all in favor? Thank you, everyone.
Now, what do we do for 2.5 hours?